That happens. If you have not read the announcements, you should get alerted when I post an announcement or open an announcement up. 2007 fall STEM events, check those out. If you've not downloaded the textbook link, do that. Also, week 2, we're going to go over chapter 2, the lab this Thursday's NT Reset. Remind you to bring your 3-ring binder with you. Great, and we will have a handout for you and some software for you Thursday. That's the lab where we'll be resetting, showing you how to reset a password on any Windows machine with a Linux distro. It takes under a minute once you learn how to use the tool. And so next, week 2 task, lab already talked about, review questions, at the end of every chapter there's some review questions. I just need the answers only, like you did, and then post them when you're done. Do it off the grid, that way Eagle doesn't time out, and then when you're ready you can post them in there or paste them in there, however you want to do it. You can do it on your phone, on your computer, whatever. And then the quiz, best out of 3 for the quiz. You don't have to take it 3 times, but you can. Next Tuesday there's no class, but we will have class next Thursday. We'll be doing both next Thursday. In fact, what I'll do is I'll send you the discussion video next Sunday that we would generally do on Tuesday, and then make sure and watch it before coming to class on Thursday. We'll jump right into the lab on Thursday. Campus is closed Monday for Labor Day. Tuesday it's closed for Development Day, Staff Development Day. And so both days at campus will be closed. So if your other instructors haven't told you that, I'm telling you that. And so, all right. So we're going to look tonight at chapter 2 and go into like terminology like virus you've heard of, probably malware, different types of social engineering, psychological attacks, and how those all play out. We'll also, first of all, start out with what's called malware, which again, I don't assume since it's a beginning network security class, some of you are well aware of all these terms maybe, some of you might not, so it's an introduction course, so we'll be starting at the very rudimentary level. So the first term we're going to look at in chapter 2 is malware. Basically what happens here is it enters a computer system without the owner's knowledge, and then can do a variety of different things damage-wise to the computer. Malware can be either annoying only, or it can do damage, like overwrite every file with an ICO extension or something, something like that. Primary objective of malware is to infect systems, conceal its purpose, and make profit. A lot of malware, by the way, used to be found in games that folks would download. Anymore, it can be found in links people click on email, on your phone even. Malware can be had on Android devices fairly easily, and also Windows phones as well. Seems like target that.
Music.
Do what now? Downloading pirated music. Yes, that will definitely do that, which I know nobody does that in here. So go on to the next slide. Malware that spreads. Viruses. Basically, the term virus is malicious computer code that is written by some programmer, or a script kiddie modifies it and republishes it out to the public to be reproduced on the same computer. The effects of viruses are the virus can append itself to the end of a file. Back in the day, early on, it would attach a file to an executable, or an XLS file, like an Excel file or a Word document. And every time you open that file up, it would do a little bit more damage, a little bit more damage, a little bit more damage, to where eventually the payload was released and your computer was locked up, or you couldn't get into something, or files were deleted, or files were stolen. Virus basically here moves the first 3 bytes of the original file to the virus code, and then it replaces itself with what's called jumping instructions over and over again. It does iterations over and over again every time the app is restarted or the file is restarted and opened up. Swiss cheese infections, one of the ways where virus infects themselves in executable code, like antivirus is a popular one that this happens to. You can get antivirus targeting, or a virus targeting antivirus that over time will literally replace that antivirus software with a program that looks just like the software you're using, whether it be McAfee, Norton, whatever.
Oh, I don't use that.
Same icon, it spins, it looks like it's updating, but it's doing absolutely nothing. And then it starts to collect data or put more payload in behind the scenes. The original code is transferred and stored inside the virus code. Host code executes properly after the infection. So what's happening is behind the scenes in the background, stuff's happening the user has no idea is happening. Whether it be doing screen scrapes every time they go to an HTTPS website and then recording their keyboard keystrokes to be able to get into bank accounts, credit card accounts, whatever. That's just one example of what a virus could do in this type of scenario. Split infection. This is where the virus splits into several parts, and it doesn't happen all at once generally. It's, again, over time. The parts are placed at random positions in a host program, and the head of the virus code starts at the beginning of the file, giving control of the next piece of virus code. Malware, also going on with that. When it's infected, when affected, a program is launched, the virus replicates itself, spreading itself to that computer it's on. And if it's on a network, it can actually spread itself upon the network as well, if it's a network file that started the problem. Because say somebody gets an email from someone, saves it to a network folder, and then everybody in that division opens that file that's in that folder, then everyone's infected with that same problem. Yes?
I had a girl for a bank
Mm-hmm.
who wanted to see the joke.
Okay.
It rewrote every single Word and Excel document or made it into junk.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But she never really actually downloaded, she just clicked on the stupid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just even clicking on it will do it.
Right. And people sometimes will do it either out of ignorance or out of spite, either one.
She
I've
said,
seen
"I just
both.
wanted to see the joke."
Yeah, exactly right. It's a joke. Viruses, and I've had these before, and I know you probably have too, can be annoying messages. The very first virus that ever was in existence, that can be traced back, was just annoying messages on a computer screen going over and over again.
Oh, yeah.
Examples of virus actions is causing a computer to repeatedly crash, blue screen, erasing files and reformatting a hard drive. One of the ones that first came out it was actually more of a malware. It told the user, click this button before all your files before your hard drives are reformatted. That's what it told the user. Well, nothing would have happened if they didn't click the button, but when they clicked the button, they gave it access, the computer access and rights to reformat the hard drive upon restart. And so, turning off computer security systems, security settings is another one. Here's an example, and this is hilarious. I read this every semester. I teach this. It doesn't get old. This is an annoying virus message, okay? It says here, and I'll read it to you. And it says, I think I speak for every pot smoker in North America when I say legalize marijuana. I mean, if people with AIDS, cancer, and other diseases can use it, then why can't the rest of us pot smokers use it? I don't think that's very fair to you. It's legal to grow and use in places like Australia for personal use. Then why not in North America? If doctors are using it as treatment for illnesses or illness, that it must not be that harmful, so why can't other people use it? I really do think the federal government should consider legalization of marijuana. Well, that's really all I have to say in the matter, but I hope someday, somewhere, someone listens to what I have to say and does not just regard this as just another virus, because it's more than that. It's a message for freedom. The freedom to smoke up and to have the chose to do so without fear of punishment from the law and the government. Thank you for your time.
Send him back to rhetoric.
This was a real message that was popped up. And by the way, one of the things you'll note on this, a lot of misspelling, bad grammar, run-on sentences, and you'll see that a lot in script kiddie apps or malware. Even viruses sometimes will pop up. Used to, not so much today, but it still does. Viruses cannot automatically spread to another computer. It does rely on an action of some type of action. That action could be email, that action would be clicking on a link, that action would be opening up a program, that action would be opening up a file. It also, viruses are attached to files. You can see viruses spread when people delete them from a folder. The trigger is actually deleting something is a trigger, and you can do that as well. Programmers can program that in. Viruses are spread by transferring infected files. Types of computer viruses: program computer virus infects the executable itself. Macro executes a script like Excel, even Word, Access, all have the ability to do what's called VBA programming behind the scenes, to where you can do anything without the user's knowledge. But they do have to now, though, thankfully, when a macro is attached to a document like I just mentioned, any of the documents I just mentioned, the user does have to click a button saying they realize a macro is attached to this document. Do you agree to open it up or activate it or something like that? I recommend not doing that unless you literally have talked to the individual and why that macro is there. I have seen spreadsheets still today that you have macros for keeping data updated, things of that nature, and all that makes sense. But again, call the person. If you're in the same building, walk over to the person. Don't just accept any macro, because literally as a programmer, I can tell you, you can program it to do anything, and they won't know what's going on behind the scenes. From deleting files to opening up websites in the background, to installing a keylogger. Macros, once it runs, can do anything the programmer has coded it to do without any user intervention or knowledge. A resident virus affects by opening files being opened by the user or operating system, either one. Boot virus, boot sector virus. This is a popular one. It used to be real popular. It still is in a lot of companies, a lot of individuals that maybe had this boot sector virus. Basically, what it does is it affects the MBR. It will overwrite names of things. It will delete stuff out of the MBR to where basically you have to do a repair of that MBR. Sometimes that works. Most of the time, though, you have to reformat the hard drive and start over again. Because the MBR, once it's pooched, once it's gone, is really hard to bring back sometimes, especially if it's done by a boot virus. And we'll talk more about that this semester about boot viruses. But companion virus adds a malicious copycat program to the operating system. Worm, it's a malicious program. Exploits applications or operating system vulnerability, like for instance, the operating system hasn't had patches done to it in 2 years or 10 years or 5 years or whatever. It sends copies of itself to other network devices. Worms may consume resources, leave behind a payload, and the term payload, by the way, it is defined in the chapter 1, but it's basically something that happens is a payload, something that happens, whether it be an event, whether it be multiple events, but something happens, deleting files, sending files, something happens during that payload. And it's used to harm infected systems generally. And you might have heard of like the year 2000 scare of, when the year 2000 came, everybody thought, well, computers are going to crash, stock market's going to crash, because we're not programmed in to go to 2000 once 1999 is gone. It was a big scare, didn't really do much. But there were some payload viruses out there that did hit some companies, and it just created havoc just because of user fear, basically. And IT was actually some of those spreading it back then. We were spreading the fear sometimes. Examples of worm actions: deleting computer files, allowing remote control of a computer by an attacker without the user's knowledge, where they can maybe take over a camera, take over a microphone, remote control actions while they're not using the computer, which is popular still today. Like during off time, 99% of home users and business users leave their computers on all the time. So if the right software's in there during off time, hackers can come in and do malicious things, or botnets can do malicious things overnight when the company doesn't have anyone working there or you're not in front of your computer. Yeah.
Dameware.
Do I know?
Dameware.
Game?
Dame. D-A-M-E-ware.
Oh, Daneware.
Yeah.
That works great.
Yeah. I'll talk about a whole bunch of tools this semester that'll help you. That's one of them that, will help you tremendously with a lot of these. But a lot of folks, one of the big crimes I was talking to law enforcement here in Rockford that goes on in Rockford is hackers will get a hold of a company or people's computers during the night, remote into them, and set up like a not eBay, what's the other place that you sell?
Where is sites?
Amazon?
What is it?
PayPal,
No.
eBay.
Nope.
Etsy.
Craigslist, thank you, Craigslist. They'll set up a Craigslist account on that user's machine while they're logged into remotely at 3 a.m. in the morning, set up a bogus sale of a car or something, and say you got to meet at this address. The person goes to the address, they get robbed. Well, they target the IP address, and guess what? It's back to that residential person that was a grandma or grandpa type that just leaves their computer on all the time and never, would never do anything like that. But they have to prove they didn't do that because records show they did do that because it was their IP address. And so that is believe it or not, a really big thing that goes on in the Rockford region that the computer crime scene in Rockford has to deal with a lot. And so beware of that. If you don't need your computer on at night, shut it down. And we'll talk about other precautions where you don't actually have to run your computer 24/7 unless it's a web server. Even then, there's precautions you can make in there. We'll talk about this semester to harden your network to stop things like this from happening. So this screen talks about some of the actions of malware, viruses, and worms. So action, how does it spread to other computers? How does it infect? Does there need to be user interaction? And can it be remoted? So on the action, how does it spread on a virus? Because viruses are attached to files that spread by user transferring those files to other devices. Worms are used on the network to travel from computer to computer without user interaction, by the way, on worms. How does it infect? Viruses on virus side column. Viruses insert their code into a file with code injection. Worms exploit vulnerabilities in the operating system or application. Does there need to be user interaction on viruses? Yes, most likely. Not all the time, but 99.9% of the time. And then worms? No, it does not. Can it be remote controlled? A virus? Most likely no. Worms? Definitely can be remote controlled. So malware that conceals. There's a term called Trojan, which basically has been around for hundreds of years, thousands of years. And basically it's guising something as something else, okay? And there's a lot of programs out today, gaming programs, utility programs, even on mobile side, that are Trojan type of applications that does something other than advertised, okay? The person runs it, they play a game, they play some levels, they download it for free, whatever, but behind the scenes it's doing some malicious activity. It could be doing things like screen scrapes I talked about earlier, if it's on a Windows machine or Linux machine, where basically when it sees an HTTPS on a URL, it begins doing screen scrapes or screenshots every few seconds and recording keyboard action and shipping them to an email every few hours. All of that stuff, all the time, 24/7. Example, user downloads a free calendar program. You ever heard Nothing Life's Free? You ever heard that term? Really good. It really hits home when it comes to computer programs and malware that's concealing stuff. And it still goes on today, by the way. The big one today, though, doesn't much. A lot of the bigger ones today do for marketing firms to gather data mining. Data mining is a huge underground business that makes billions of dollars a week, data mining. What I mean by that is companies will pay, valid companies, legit companies will pay good money to get a demographic of a certain audience, say males from 18 to 34 that likes to watch boxing and lives in Illinois. Okay, they want that demographic and they make between $45,000 and $65,000. How are they going to get that information? Well, unless you filled out a form somewhere along the way, or you've done it online, whether it be on Facebook, Twitter, there's other ways to get it. And one of those ways to get it is through these Trojan type of apps, that the big ones today for Trojan type of apps is to get your data. So to get the free app, you have to fill out all this information about yourself, do a survey maybe, or 3 or 4 surveys. Then at the end of it, believe it or not, it does tell people now, because they've been taken to court, a lot of them, you do know by hitting continue, you will get the free app, but we can use your data any way we want to use it. And people continue on. But it's been fought in a court of law, even up to the Supreme Court, that people that don't know better or don't read the fine print, which sometimes these have, like really fine print to read, the judges have ruled that they are knowingly putting a whole bunch of legalese in, they're hiring lawyers to put these words together to where people read the first paragraph and they're like, nope, not reading anymore, I agree, whatever. The user is being misled, even though, and it is unknowingly, according to many judges, because it's kind of hidden. So that information is kind of hidden on what exactly is going to happen. So that's a big one today, actually. The judges are still fighting today in court with lawyers and big companies that are trying to get data mined, and that's a big moneymaker, by the way. Rootkits, this is popular. When I was IT manager here, we had a rootkit that hit many servers back then, and it carried back to a student that plugged a USB drive in, a student worker plugged a USB drive in a server to dump some updates or something from valid software updates that we were doing. But on that, he used a personal thumb drive that had a rootkit on the thumb drive that infected a server. It took about a week of figuring out which one it started at. Then we basically had to do a whole bunch of, long story short, a whole bunch of backups and restoring and cleaning up data, and we had to reformat a lot of hard drives and replace a lot of hard drives. But basically, the gist of rootkits, and there's a lot of different variants, by the way, is it's used by an attacker to hide stuff from going on in a server mainly. It can happen to computers, regular computers, but it really target is servers. Because if you can get a server, if you can take over a server, you can really do a lot of damage to a network, regardless of whatever network that might be. It can hide things like trace logs when things are accessed, when folders are accessed, when programs are accessed. It can alter or replace operating system files and modified versions of the files, specifically designed to ignore malicious activity. Rootkits can be detected using programs, but I have seen rootkits that are very hard to detect, but you can see by the activity on the server, mainly, that something's going on that's weird. Can't really explain it and can't find it. And 9 times out of 10, what we do in IT is, again, take it offline immediately. We will reformat that drive or get a new drive and do the latest backup and check it offline, that backup, to make sure it's clean. Because servers generally, if it's a data type of server, you want to start with a fresh OS, but then data itself, you can't just, start data fresh. You have to refresh the data on the server that was on there because people rely upon it, like student records or HR or something like that. Removal of rootkit can be very difficult. I've done it in batch files, which you'll learn about. Some of you know what batch files are, some of you don't. You'll learn about that this semester in network security. We still use batch files. I still use batch files to clean up files and to find information. And a batch file basically is a file that has multiple commands in it that can do multiple things, very powerful things, okay, if you know the right commands to put in. And it can do things like moving files, searching directories, downloading things. It can do a whole bunch of stuff in a batch if you know what you're doing on a batch file. The original operating system must be restored, reformatted hard drive, as always mentioned, and already mentioned also reinstalling the operating system. This is another one too that has been in the last 5 years really big. These two on this slide, logic bomb and backdoors, both. Logic bomb basically is where the computer code lies dormant till a date and time or an event. Okay, that event could be, like I mentioned earlier, deleting a file. Then a logic bomb hits, or right-clicking a file, or left-clicking a file, or it checks a certain weather station for a certain temperature to hit in that region, then that trigger hits. It's whatever the programmer decided for that logic bomb to be triggered, it's up to that programmer to decide. And you don't know what it is because you didn't program it, right? And so logic bombs can lay dormant and triggered by a specific action or event, then perform malicious activities. Logic bombs in the past have been done, people didn't get raises. They hired hackers to put a logic bomb in software on a computer on a network to delete all the HR files at the time that they leave the company or something, whatever. That's been done before. If you think of it, it's probably been done or somebody's tried it already when it comes to networks. difficult to detect before it's triggered. So again, we'll learn more about what's called hardening this semester as time goes on. Backdoor, software code that circumvents normal security to get program access. Normal security would be like username, password, okay? That's normal security, right? So if you get into your computer in the morning or when you come in to Eagle, you put username, password. A backdoor would say, I don't need that. I can come in through the back of the software and get in by bypassing the username, password. You know what you're doing? You can do what's called a SQL injection. And if that program has not been programmed to detect SQL injection, it can break it and get into most any system unless they've been programmed to withhold a SQL injection. And a SQL injection basically, when it comes to websites, is simply logging in as an admin with a certain script and a URL. So you put the URL up at the top, question mark, and then a SQL script that basically logs the person in to that website. And if there's not been SQL injection safeties put into the code, it can easily happen. Also, backdoor, common practices, intent to remove backdoors in final application. And I'm a developer. I've been doing it for 30 years now. When we're developing things as developers, we always leave backdoors in to get into stuff. It's easier, right? Because we're working on it every day. We don't want to go in through the long way. We want to go through the back door. Well, sometimes developers leave. And they have created backdoors that they don't tell anybody, especially if they left on bad terms. They're definitely not going to tell anybody. And we've had backdoors in Microsoft. We've had backdoors in Apple. We've had backdoors in Linux. We've had backdoors in every known system to man that's out there, okay? Because if you have a developer developing something, which you're always going to have, whether it be your computer in front of you, your cell phone, your garage door controller, your TV, your smart TV, all of those have been programmed by somebody. And those somebodies have created backdoors in those devices, okay? And most likely, when release time comes, final release, there could be some backdoors still open, all right? And that's where the hacker community gets a hold of it, whether this disgruntled developer lets it out or somebody finds it, which that happens as well. Just, playing around and finding it, and then they release it to the community. So on malware, 3 columns here: description, reason, and result. The reason for a logic bomb, or here's a description of a logic bomb, was planted in a financial services computer. And I'm going to collapse this if I can. There, I'll just do that. The logic bomb was planted in a financial service computer network that caused 1,000 computers to delete critical data. That's pretty serious.
That's wild.
Reason for attack: a disgruntled employee had counted on us to cause the company's stock price to drop. The employee would earn money from the price drop. Kind of like maybe a recent fight I just heard of, maybe? I don't know. 10th round, though, that's pretty good. There's some money made on that fight, you know that. Results: the logic bomb detonated, yet the employee was caught, sentenced to 8 years in prison, and ordered to pay $3.1 million restitution. Okay, so didn't get away with that one. Next one description is: the logic bomb, a defense contractor, was designed to delete important rocket project data. The reason the employee's plan was to be hired as a high-paid consultant to fix the problem. Result: the logic bomb was discovered, disabled before triggered. The employee was charged with computer tampering, attempted fraud, and was fined only $5,000. I thought that's pretty low, $5,000.
Yeah.
Right, I thought that's pretty low.
Yeah.
This next one, a logic bomb at a health services firm, was set off to employee's birthday. The employee was angered that he might be laid off, although he wasn't. The employee was sentenced to 30 months in federal prison and paid $81,200 restitution to the company. Crazy. So malware for profits, I already talked about some of these. One of them I talked about earlier on the marketing side would be adware. Adware used to be a huge problem, not so much anymore, okay, on computers. It's just shifted. It's now on cell phones. It's now on text messages, cold calls, automated calls. How many gets 10 automated calls a week or more? Block, right?
Yep.
Keep calling with a different number.
Keep calling the different number. You change, the same area code, different number. We all have them. You said, what's the big deal about that? Well, they've proven in that market, if you can get out of 1,000 calls, 10 people, just 10 people to pick up, if that one person gets 1,000 calls and 10 people pick up, that's good. That's a good thing. Okay? And you times that times 1,000,000 all over the world, because they're going 24/7 all over the world. So we've shifted today from the cold calling, kind of social engineering type. In fact, I know a guy, I won't mention his name I'll leave his information vague here, but he created a little machine, right? A little software that basically when those people call, if it's a real person, which 99.9% of the time it's not, but when he finds a real person, he can put it on this automated software. It's like an artificial intelligence that keeps asking questions about stuff like, hey, what's your name? How long you been here? Been working. So, and it can go like one time. I think the limit he did was he had the telemarketer on the phone for 4.5 hours. The person got absolutely no information. It was just like a round robin of all these random questions. Like, so before I can give you anything, one question: what's your favorite cereal? No, I can't. I cannot give you anything without knowing that. And then he put a pause in the software. He had to wait for this person, whoever it was, to talk, then stop, pause for a few seconds, then he would ask another question. Again, 3.5, 4 hours. It was hilarious. I wish I could market that, man. That'd be great. I know people would buy it.
My dad let a guy on for a half hour.
Yeah, I know people that done it. I've done it myself, yeah.
He was trying to use TeamViewer illegally.
Yeah.
My dad let him on for a half hour.
I was watching this one dude on YouTube talking to some people from the Middle East. They were trying to get some info from him.
Right.
And so he just kept leading them on and on.
Sure, yeah.
And then at the end, oh my gosh, he started cussing them out and saying, you guys are a bunch of da-da-da blurs.
Yeah.
And I just led you on for like 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
And he called them like worthless saying.
Well, like the majority of us with the raise of hands said, we block them, we don't answer them.
Oh my God.
But people are answering. That's why they keep calling. And really the target audience for that, and we'll talk more about this semester, target audience is those that are, the elderly actually is a big target audience because they have no family members that will visit them anymore. Kids are gone. They don't have any friends are gone. They passed. And any communication, any call, they answer. Some people, not all, but some, okay? And one of the things I do every semester here is I go to a number of retired communities. Here in Rock Valley, we have a big retired community that we go to and just teach them on safety things. We do role playing and stuff like that. Because a lot of them just, again, they're lonely and they don't have anybody to talk to. And if somebody from India or Washington or Jersey or here in Rockford calls, telemarketer, they're more than willing to talk to them about stuff. And so you'll learn ways this semester to educate people. I'll give you materials I use to educate people as well. But Adware's kind of shifted its scope a little bit. But one of the big ones on this list on malware designed for profit is botnets. Botnets is what I mentioned earlier, where it runs at night, like after midnight, 2 in the morning, maybe from 3 to 6, 3 to 5, 2 to 5, 2 to 6. And it does stuff in the background. And it really does, it can do stuff like generating data, mining data of those computers it's connected to. Then spyware, again, not so much today as it was a few years back, but it basically would just infect your computer with a bunch of pop-up ads and a whole bunch of bars on your browser. I remember watching this video of this one kid whose mom was on him about getting his homework done, and he said, well, I've only got so much room on my browser. She goes, what are you talking about? So she went down to the basement, and the kid, those toolbars, right, that people get added to their browser. He had that much of a left at the bottom of his browser. Everything above it was a toolbar. And so literally, he could only read like 3 sentences at a time on a really small font. And so, again, each one of those toolbars, in fact, free apps are real prone for toolbars, by the way. Do you want to install this toolbar, that toolbar, this toolbar, that toolbar, this toolbar? And again, a lot of those in the back end, Trojan type applications. A lot of them are annoying because they take up a lot of space. And then keyloggers, if you don't know what a keylogger is, it can be both hardware and software, both. A keylogger, initially back in the day, could literally be plugged in with a USB thumb drive to launch something, or they even had some devices way back that had a keyboard that would actually be replaced with another keyboard, and a recorder was in the keyboard. So literally you would come and get the data from the keyboard periodically. The hackers would, way back before we had USB thumb drives, before we had internet that was prone in all the companies. And so anyway, now today though, most likely keyloggers are going to be from a click on a link somewhere. Once it installs a small application, it can then take every key you type, but it's not generally all the time. It's only going to be triggered at certain things, like I mentioned earlier, like you're going to a secure website. Then it gets all your key logs. Sends the hacker the websites and all your keys, especially when it gets to a login screen, which isn't real hard to do, to code in when you see somebody in a login screen, because most login screens have what word at the top of the web page? Login. It's the title of the page. So you look for title page login, HTTPS, then you start doing screen scrapes, which is like screenshots, and keyboard keylogger. So again, still real popular, still happens today, and keyloggers are actually targeted today a lot on social media, for Facebook, mainly Facebook, not so much Twitter and LinkedIn, but mainly Facebook, because Facebook still, they're getting better, but they still have a lot of junk apps out there, and a lot of apps that maybe aren't too secure on the back end. And so be real careful on apps that you run on your Facebook environment, what data it's gathering. Some are good. I'm not saying they're all bad. Yeah. Yeah.
Did anybody try on Saturday? My wife went crazy. She couldn't get to Facebook. It was actually down.
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised.
I was surprised. I was really surprised. I don't have Facebook.
Right.
My ex-wife.
Sure. Yeah.
When I started looking for it, yeah, she was like nowhere to be found. It was Saturday morning about 7:30.
Yeah. It wasn't surprising. I think it was, as a developer, we use a really popular website called GitHub to do all of our source control. It was down a week and a half ago for like 6 hours. And some developers, that's all they use for their source code. And so it's a lot of money waiting to get done. Same thing if Google went down, which has in the past. And so, but basically, the next thing is zombie computers with botnets. Basically, the zombie computer is where computers are taken over either totally or at certain times. Most of the time, it's like certain times, so it won't be found. I've even seen if most of modern computers today, you can start your computer up from a NIC card.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if you have a modern computer, which most of you might at home, maybe not all of you, but let's say 40% of you do. Okay. If you have the right software on your computer and that installs it and gives admin rights and it gets the IP address of that, and and you can install correct software, DNS software, to where the hackers, whenever your provider changes that IP address, it gets that new IP address. It can ping your computer to boot it up and then start doing stuff whenever it wants to. So even if you shut it down, if it has the right information and you've opened up, and your computer's opened up to it and you've not locked it down for that functionality, it could boot it up from a service outside in Germany somewhere or in China somewhere and boot up your computer. So we'll talk about ways you can harden that this semester. Everything I'm talking about can be scary, for sure. I know it can be. But there are ways to harden your computer and your network for these things to be less likely to happen. And I always tell students, I'll beat it in your head this semester over and over again, nothing's 100% in life but what? Death and what else?
Taxes.
And a whole bunch of other stuff. But sure, those two things, right? Network security, you can harden a network, which is basically securing a network and a computer the best you can, whether it be hardware, software, rules, procedures, usability, all that good stuff. And still, at the end of the day, you cannot 100%. Except, well, there is one way. unplug it from the wall and it doesn't never get connected to the wall or power or internet, right? Then yeah, that's a surefire way for sure. And so botnets or zombies work together. Group of zombie computers work together and called a botnet. And there's been whole countries, Bolivia, and Soviet Union also too, parts of the Soviet Union, all controlled by botnets to take down intranets and internets and networks. Some of these botnets were driven by government to do this, to block internet connectivity for their people. Early botnet attacks used internet relay chat to remotely control zombies. Today, it's just port 80 through HTTP, which you'll learn about that this semester as well. Botnet's advantage for attackers is to operate in the background, often with no visible evidence. So when they show up at 9 in the morning, they log in like normal, do their work like normal. Literally nothing has changed for them in their work environment. I mean, that's the whole reason for a botnet. No visible evidence. It shouldn't be if it's a good botnet. Provides means for concealing the actions of attackers. Can remain active for years. So there's been botnet channels found that have been embedded in certain regions of even the U.S. and companies for years and running in the background and doing stuff. And there are, by the way, positive uses for botnets as well, like supercomputer calculations, for cancer and for research. They have to crunch a lot of big numbers all the time. You can actually find places, find research folks that need your computer for a certain time of the day to do stuff for research. Johns Hopkins does it. A lot of different places will do it. And there's positive uses for it. There's also negative, like anything in life. Large percent of botnets or zombies are accessible at any given time, but and this is why right here, everybody's always on. Always on, computer's always on, internet's always on. On this one, all I want to mention is on the type of attack, which is basically on two of them actually, spamming and spreading malware. Well, I'll even do the third one, manipulating online polls. That's another one too. Spamming is a botnet consisting of 1,000 zombies enables an attacker to send massive amounts of email or spam. Some botnets can also harvest email addresses. Spreading malware, botnets can be used to spread malware, create new zombies and new botnets. Ability to download and execute files sent by the attacker. Manipulating online polls. Because each zombie has a unique internet IP address, each vote by a zombie will be called credible, because most voting online things allow one vote per IP address. Denial of service. Botnets can flood a web server with thousands of requests and overwhelm it to where it can't respond, and legitimate requests are denied. Okay, so web servers can be brought down, file servers can be brought down. Spyware, software that gathers information without user consent, used for advertising, collecting personal information, and changing computer configurations. Spyware's negative effects: slows the computer down. How many remember spyware a lot? Again, spyware used to be huge in computers, now not so much. Causes systems instability, may install new browser menus, may place new shortcuts on a computer desktop, may hijack a home page, and increase pop-ups. So technology, description, and impact. On technology column, for automatic download of software, it's used to download and install software without the user's interaction. And again, a lot of name brand softwares like Adobe is a good example, want you to, every time you update their software, let's turn on the automatic one so we don't have to worry about it anymore. I don't feel comfortable doing that. Most IT folks don't feel comfortable doing that, but end users, yeah. I mean, there's sometimes Adobe might have 8 updates in 2 months. Okay, people just get tired of it, and they say, "Okay, automatic, don't care." Right? And you understandably understand why they do that. It could install unauthorized applications, and even Adobe, just pick on them. They're big, they got a lot of money. There was an update they did a while back that literally did halt a lot of network activity on businesses because it affected ports that it blocked in the software that also affected other things on networks if they use those ports. So they had to roll it back, Adobe did, but it caused a lot of problems. So even valid software, I don't really recommend automatic updates on anything. And we'll learn about this this semester, terminology. I talked about honeypot last week a little bit, but we'll also learn about using virtual machines, virtual PCs, to be off the grid of the network to test updates, to test software updates. Definitely recommend that as well. Here on campus, we have a packaging system that we package all of our updates incrementally once a month. Adobe, Microsoft, all the software that might be on the machines. And what it does is we tell the employees to keep their computers on a certain day. It comes in at night, restarts the computer, boots it up, installs all the updates. But those updates have been tested for maybe 30 days, 45 days, 60 days, sometimes even longer before they've been implemented in the update round. And there are packages out there, both free and cost, to do updates, for you to push updates out yourself and to manage them. And I recommend that. That's what I recommend. Most IT folks do as well. Tracking software, this is used to monitor behavior, including personal identifiable or other sensitive information. The impact may collect personal information that can be shared widely. I mean, how many heard in the news about the chip in the hand thing? The company, I think it was Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Was it Wisconsin?
It was Wisconsin. They were for them to use
Okay,
machines
and that's a little extreme, but
That's pretty cool though, how you can just swipe your hand across though.
and that's been around for a while.
yeah, Germany's had that for a long
Yeah,
time.
18 years ago, I lived in Missouri 18 years ago, and well, been longer than that now. It's been 22 years ago actually. And I knew a person that worked in Walmart in Missouri, and in Joplin, Missouri. They had a person come through, and they were checking him out, and they said, he was released from prison in Texas, and they did a pilot program back then on the chip technology. He had it in his hand. He also had his debit card as well. He had it in his hand. She called the store manager, and he explained to her what it was, and so they just scanned it to see what it would do. Sure enough, scanned his hand, it was just like a debit card, and it's collected his information. He had to sign it on the screen like it would a credit card. Done. And that was 20 plus years ago that was happening. And today the technology is such to where the one they did the interview I saw looked like about a quarter the size of a piece of rice in your hand, but still I don't think I would do that. But that technology had been out a while, and the pilot, he was released early from prison because of this chip. There was he had done something probably fairly egregious, I'm guessing, to have it put in his body, and then he had to have it checked periodically, and then said that if it because it was basically a beta type thing, and they were going to have replaced periodically as well as the technology increased. So it's been around a while. Okay, a couple more slides here. We'll talk about Adware Programming, program that delivers advertising content in manner unexpected, unwanted, like pop-ups, tracking online information, online activities. Downside of Adware, and it's still around a little bit, may display objectionable content. And Adware is actually morphed today to mobile kind of news channels that you watch or listen to that have ads on the side. And you're like, how do they know I like all this stuff, right? How do they know I like, sports or I like music or whatever, this genre? And you're like, you're finding it more and more, because Google is one of them that was one of the first ones on the block, that when you email people in Gmail or Google, whatever you want to call it, they do aggregate that data and collect that data for keywords. It's free Gmail. It's part of the user agreement we sign. And they use that data and sell it to not only Google uses it, but other content providers use it as well to push data into your phones or onto your Facebook or whatever. That's where it stems from. Now, some people say, well, they're reading my emails. No, they're not reading it. They're just scanning it for words and keywords. And over a period of time, you're like, you know, and I've had people say, well, that's, you know, infringement of rights. So well, delete your Google account. Don't use it. There's other ones out there. Or just use your email at work. Or just use there's other secure email providers, by the way. And we'll get into some this semester that have been created in the last year that are very secure. Yes, question or
So,
comment.
even if you were to delete your Gmail, if you emailed someone that had a Gmail, wouldn't they get it just because you emailed someone that had it?
Well, the further question is on what you're saying or ramifications is, even though you delete your Gmail account, which I always tell people, create a Gmail account for like stuff online you fill out, but it's not, you know, it's your junk email basically, which I've done over the years as well. But even if you delete your Gmail account, that data that they've collected on you stays in their servers and stays in their backups forever. And that's why I tell students, and I'll tell you now, and I'll end on this, I guess, while we're talking about this. Be real careful what you post online. Be real careful what you post on social media, because it's forever. It's a forever footprint, and it can be used in job interviews, and we've probably heard horror stories of it. Well-meaning students go to college and graduate with high marks and have promising careers, and somebody sees a Facebook page they were tagged on or a party they were at, and they're like, we don't really want you, at our business because of that. So you be real careful on even your social presence today, even more so than was. I think it's ever increasing need for all of us, including myself, to really be careful on our social media presence when it comes to your future work and availability for future work. And I'll end on that. Okay, I'll end on that positive note. So, but no, Thursday when you come to class, make sure to bring your 3-ring binder, the sleeves as well. Bring those. Be getting some software, and 3-ring binder will have. When you guys come in, you'll have at your desk, at your table, a 3-hole punched handout with the software, and we'll get right into it when you come in on Thursday. Sound good? Great.
Hey, do you want us to log off or shut down?
Yeah, Stephanie's not going to be here afterwards, so please shut down your computers. On Tuesday, we will shut down your computers. On Thursday, we won't, because I have a 110 afterwards.
I just wanted to talk to you about a possible app idea.
Oh, yeah, great.
I actually have a company that would maybe want me to do an app for them.
Okay.
Is that a possibility, or?
Yeah. What type of app are you talking about?
He basically just wanted to have it so it displays his weekly newsletter and then being able to purchase.
Okay.
Yeah,
So like for iOS and Android both? Yeah,
probably.
Okay, cool. I'd recommend iOS first and then go to
Yeah.
Android. Yeah, cool. That'd be perfect.
Okay, great.
I like it. Yeah.
Especially when you say sleeves, CD sleeves?
Yeah. It can be the sleeves, or some students ask, can I just bring my CD case? You can do that too.
Just something, okay.
There
Just
you
something
go.
to hold the disc.
Yeah, that'll work. Yeah, that'll
My
work.
dad does security at Whiteboard
Yeah.
on this, so like,
That's where I'm headed, Woodward.
so